Welcome. I'm Andy Carlson, and you're listening to the Time with Tim podcast. Each episode, we explore the impact of complex trauma through the personal journeys of our guests. Along the way, we'll connect with experts and individuals who share their unique perspectives, insights, and practical tools to help you on your healing journey. Let's take this time to learn together. Welcome back to Time with Tim. I'm your host, Andy Carlson, and today Tim and I are joined by Tiayrra Bradley, an artist, healer, and the visionary behind A Brilliant Nomad and Birthday. Tiayrra's work lives at the intersection of art, wellness, and justice. Her journey spans the world of global tech, deep spiritual transformation, and the courageous work of trauma healing. In today's conversation, we'll begin with Tiayrra's personal story, how trauma shaped her early life, and explore the ways she now invites healing through creativity, embodiment, and radical self-trust. Tiayrra, we're honored to have you here.
Thank you, Andy. That was an amazing intro. I was like, wow, I did all that.
There was a lot. I felt like I was cutting half of it out, so there's a lot of
Yeah,
good
it's
stuff that
like,
you've done.
yeah, okay. I'm like, I gotta add comedian to it too now, apparently,
Mm,
because we're
mm,
going through that. But yes, thank you for having me. Yeah, it's a pleasure to talk and get through some life things and healing and go through there. So, yeah, I'll kind of start with my background a bit. I was born and raised in Philadelphia, with my parents and two older siblings. I have two older brothers, so I'm the youngest. And so I think growing up for me was interesting because being the youngest, it was like my parents were either at work or together, and then my two oldest brothers, like, they would be hanging out together. And so I was kind of always like in basketball practice or music, like kind of the lone wolf to myself. And so as a kid, I would kind of refer to myself as the little girl in the back room because every house we moved into, like my room would kind of be in the back somewhere. And so um, inadvertently, I just, yeah, kind of felt invisible, or just kind of to myself. But it's also the thing that I look back on now, which the breeding ground for my creativity and my imagination, though, because I spent so much time alone or in my room or in extracurricular activities. I was always doing something, or into things, making things in my rooms or pillows or, art stuff. And so it's shaped now, how I am as an artist doing so many different things and mediums. And so early on, when I was about 3 years old, I experienced childhood sexual abuse, which I didn't even tell my family until I was 33. After going through Lift program, actually, is which like helped me even tell anybody. I held that on for so long, and I didn't even know how old I was when I experienced that until I talked to my brothers and family about it, and kind of gave them a gist of like around that time what was going on, and then kind of they deducted how old they were, and then that's how I like even figured out how old I was around the time, because just my memory was so spotted. And so experienced that very young. I think that made me very fearful and quiet, shy as a kid. I was a very, very shy kid, like growing up, very quiet, very to myself. Outside of just like my parents and brothers, I didn't like talking to other or really interacting with other people. And then even going into school, which is interesting because I was just like telling friends about this recently. So my oldest brother is 8 years older than me, and then I have a brother that's 2 years older than me. And so my middle older brother, we always went to the same schools, elementary all throughout. And he was like very popular, very known. And so people would like try to befriend me and be like, oh, and they would call me like Little Chase. That was his name. I didn't even have a name until I got to like college. I was just known as like Chase's sister. And so girls especially would like try to be my friend, and they would like buy me stuff, take me out and stuff. And then eventually it was because they were trying to like get it cool with my brother, right? And so if whatever, if he didn't like them or something happened with them, then they would stop being my friend. And so it took me a few years to like catch on to the rhythm. I'm like, oh wait, they're not like really trying to be my friend. They just want to get close to my brother. And so this was happening like in school, but then it was also happening in church settings too. And so eventually, when I caught on to the pattern, I just like cut, being friends with people, especially women. And so, yeah, growing up, a lot of my trauma was centered around women, and having, abuse from women. And it created a deep mistrust, not just with women, but with my own womanhood and femininity. I think there are parts of myself that I tried to disconnect to from because of such like deep resentment towards women. And it wasn't until I would say like end of my high school year when I really started like coming back around and having friends. I grew up, in a Christian household, and so I went to a like small Christian high school, and there's where like I met my best friend, which we're still best friends to this day. And that was like the beginning of like kind of integrating self, trusting women again and having just female friendships, because I would like most of my friends growing up would be guys. Like I connected to guys more. And I played sports. My brothers played sports, so that was a way even for me to like connect to my brothers and my dad, and playing sports and stuff. And then in school, like I would be friends with like most of my guy friends. So I just grew up like relating more to the guys, and I'm wearing the baggy jeans and, just very tomboyish and things of that nature. And I think even I wouldn't call them class clowns. I would say like the class comedians. I think hanging around them even foster some of my own like humor and being real sharp on my feet and punchlines and things like that. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I grew up. Went off to so I played basketball from about second grade up until my sophomore year of college. That was like life. It was school, kind of basketball, and that was it. It was always like a good academic student and things like that. Went off to college, and sports and basketball was so much a part of my identity growing up that going into college and things of that nature, I kept playing, even though I think I fell out of love with it by like 10th grade, but because it was the thing, like Tiayrra's expected, to be the basketball player and things. I didn't want to disappoint, my father, my family, other people around me that was like, yo, you're really good. Like, you need to pursue this. And so I just played through, resenting it. I remember one day that kind of finally broke me. We were practicing in the gym. This is by the time I got to college. We were practicing one day, getting ready for like the playoffs. And I was hoping we did not make it that year. Like you would think you want your team to make the playoffs and win, but I was just like, oh, we got more weeks and more practice. And we're like practicing one day in the gym, and it's like a nice spring, day. And I see people outside, and they're like on campus riding their bikes and chatting. I'm just like, oh, I want to be outside so bad, and I'm here. And then that next year is when I finally made the choice that like, hey, like I don't want to play anymore. And even going through that with my career and profession, going into school, I initially went into college as a pre-med major, and then quickly realized this is not going to work. I think first day of school, the professor was talking, and I'm like writing notes, and by the mid class, I just closed my notebook and stopped taking notes. I'm like, this is not going to happen. I think it was a lot of pressure, and I think for the first time in my life, I felt like I was going to experience failure, and that scared me. Because I was like always on my, the high academic child, and I learned very quickly to like be the good kid, be quiet, and just kind of stay out the way as a way to like stay invisible and not have people bother me, so to speak. And I think this is something Tim, you and I talked about before. It was like I knew if I like did my chores and stuff, do my homework, my parents wouldn't bother me. If I did everything I was supposed to do in church, you know, God wouldn't bother me. And so I kind of just like lived this life that was very safe and very, you know what I mean, quiet. And so going through, you know, those stages, getting to college, it was that pressure was building where I'm like, I didn't feel like I was really being myself, you know what I mean? And so I'm going into this major that like people are once again expecting me to do and go after. And so eventually, like I took a semester and just went undecided, and eventually did come back and just like, all right, I'm just going to choose math. Because at the time, I think I wanted to go into art at that time. Like, so during this time too, I'm like doing artsy things on the side. Like I started a pillow business, making sports pillows when I was in like 6th grade, and I'm like selling them at school to different kids. You know, I'm like hustling. And so I was always doing different art things on the side in addition to like academics and basketball. So I always had that in me. And so there was a point where I wanted to kind of explore. I remember one of my professors telling me, my French professor, she was just like, I think you should go into like occupational therapy, and study that. I don't know why she said this to me. She just saw something in me that even at the time I didn't see. And I started like looking it up, and I was like, oh, this sounds kind of cool. Like you can teach people how to do like different art stuff in nursing homes or like job centers. But when I kind of want, you know, look into it and pursue it, my dad was like, I'm not paying for you to go to school to do art. Like, if you go that route, you kind of on your own type of thing. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so I think under that pressure, I just was like, all right, well, let me choose a major, right? That's going to make money. And so I ended up eventually getting my degree in like math and computer science, worked in programming for about 5 years after school. But then during that time as well, I like started a clothing line with one of my friends. I had picked up a website class as part of my elective. And so from there, I started learning like web design and things like that. I did, at the time, my brother was into music. He still is into music, but I had designed his website. And so when it went live, like people would look at it like, yo, your website's really cool. Who did this? And he was like, oh, my sister. Like, I refer you. And so he was like referring people to me. And I'm like, dude, I don't know how to really do that. Like, I did this a part of class, but I don't like do this for real. And so he kept referring people to me until eventually I was like, all right. And I kind of took a chance on one client and did their website, and then they loved it, and then they, you know, referred me to other people, and then it just grew. And before I knew it, I was like on the side from doing programming stuff. I was doing web design for people, and then that turned into graphic design with their logos and stuff. And so that led me to starting the clothing line with one of my college friends, Ashley. And that was like going really, really well. At the time, Instagram had just came out too. I think this is like 2009. And so she, you know, created a profile for us and like, yeah, we have like 1,000 people following us. And I'm like, following us where? Like, what are you talking about? Right? Like, what is this? And so I'm like on here and like people are posting pictures and stuff. And I'm like, okay. And so eventually we start hiring like photographers to take pictures of the clothes and t-shirts, and we're getting a lot of responses and sales. We're like traveling between, you know, New York and DC every weekend, vending. And so eventually that starts to take off. But then I'm also still in programming, and programming is one of those spaces where your mind has to be there and nowhere else kind of thing. And so I'm kind of chasing these two rabbits, and the programming, you know, at work, I'm like probably not being the best worker. I'm like in the break room, you know, putting in print orders and stuff during my lunch break. And so it was starting to like take a toll on that. And I knew like I knew the first day I kind of got my official programming job after coming out of internships in college that, like, I can't do this the next 30 years of my life. Like, I knew that much, but then I didn't know necessarily where. I think, like, I kind of always imagined myself being a business owner, but I didn't know what industry or field. I just felt like I just wanted to own a business. And so eventually I get fired from my programming job at the time, literally like the day before I move into my first apartment. Um, Kind of like everything around that time just like imploded, um, and so I remember being in my apartment, newly, moved in apartment. Now I got rent. I'm like, oh my gosh, I done lost my job. Like, what is going on? And at that time, I just remember like praying and kind of asking God, like, I felt like everything I was doing in my life, I was forcing, and I was like trying to make things work that just was not working. And the only thing that did feel right at the time was the art clothing line. And when I was in that space, was like, oh, I really feel like alive here. And so I just like prayed, like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, where I'm supposed to be, but just like guide me, what am I supposed to be doing? There was like somebody I was like trying to date at the time that imploded. Like everything, literally, like all the security blankets I had in my life at the time within a week were like gone, and I was just like forced with myself. And so that was like, I think, the first beginning moment of my real transformation and healing journey, because it was like the first time I'm like, okay, life, this don't, something ain't working. I'm doing all the right things. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm doing what I'm told to be doing, but I don't feel any peace or any fulfillment. And so yeah, I prayed and I said, like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing right now, but like wherever I'm supposed to be at in life, guide me there. And so and then I just kind of remember, saying I'd love, this art thing. I would love to get more and maybe explore this space in this area of my life, but like at the time I didn't have any friends that were in the arts, and so I was just like, at least put me around people and relationships where I can learn and stuff. And so like 6 months later, I got a job doing web design, and there I met some of my friends that are friends now. My friend Manny, a couple of my other friends that were all artists. And so I was in that job for about a year and a half. And then, so during this time, we're still continuing doing the clothing line. That's going well. And then I also like create a separate Instagram account for just myself. And so as we were like hiring other photographers to take our photos, at a certain point we were like, okay, it's only so many photos we can share. So it was like we wanted to do more photos, so it was like, all right, well, we can't hire a photo photographer every week. And so that's when I started just using my phone, and I would like take pictures and do different things, and we would, get some of our friends to model for us, and I'm like picking out the scouting locations. And so then that's how I came and just was doing photography. And so from that, I created my own separate page, separate from the business. And I'm like posting, finding color walls around the city. And I'm getting my nieces and nephews and where they got smoke bombs and stuff in their hands. And so about, I want to say, a year into building my own account, Instagram had featured it. And so I went from like 500 followers to 50,000 followers in 3 weeks. And I was like, whoa, like, what is going on? And so, like, brands are starting to reach out to me, big brands, Google me. And I'm like, what? Am I like, what? Like, what am I supposed to charge these people? That imposter syndrome kicked in, because I'm like, who, what, and especially being a shy person right now, all this attention is coming, and I'm really like, what is this? What's going on? And so, yeah, that's like a year in. I'm working the web design job. About a year and a half into that, I get an opportunity with Netflix to work with a project with them on the West Coast for about 3 weeks. And so I was kind of faced with a dilemma where I'm like, all right, I got this job opportunity. I didn't have enough like vacation leave at the time, but the job was willing to like still let me go and come back to work. I just would have had to like make up, pay that time back. And so I remember going back to that prayer of just like, hey, I just need to be at least meet artists, be in that field. And I felt like when I got that job and I had, by that time I had met, a group of friends that we were just like learning from each other. I was like, oh, I got what I prayed for, so I can leave now, kind of thing. And so that's what kind of gave me the motivation or kind of confirmation or stillness to like, okay, it's time to like go and explore this art thing, and kind of take a risk on, on yourself. And so I took a leap. I left that job, did the project that the money from that like helped me over a few months, and then I was still getting like different projects in here and there from brands, but that kind of set me on the path to go full time and freelance into my work. And I was on that path for 10 years, still on that path now. It's been almost 11 years now, of just like building out my art in so many ways. And so, kind of fast forward, I'm like doing my thing. My art, is gaining more attention. I'm working more with more brands and things of that nature. I'm also like involved in my church at the time and like doing art and social media for them. And then 2020 comes, the pandemic. And so that actually was a very peaceful time for me. It was a very, like, obviously tragic and strange time for the world, but it was like the first time that, like, I got to stop and kind of just breathe because it felt like, yeah, I was just had my head down for so long, just kind of grinding it out, doing the work, doing so much that I didn't have much time to kind of internally like know what's going on. And so there was like little things within the church going on at the time that I like kind of sensed. Like when I first came into the church, there was like a break or a splitting of the church, like literally the first Sunday I came, like after, right? That should have been warned me. But like I remember after the service, the pastor getting up and kind of like excusing everybody out, like, if you are a member, you can stay, like, because we have to address things. And then on hindsight, because I had friends that were going there at the time, so they kind of told me, what was going on, it's like letters going out. So anyway, there are things that I kind of like already warned, just in a sense of like leadership and mismanagement, different things like that. But I'm a person who like tries to give people the benefit of the doubt, kind of thing. And I'm like, okay, just because one person has experienced someone in one way, that person, people can change. You know what I mean? So who's to say that things haven't changed or whatever? So I go into the situation. I'm there for about 4 or 5 years. But then like being kind of behind the scenes in leadership, I start like some of the things I was like told about going in, I'm starting to see and experience. And I'm like, oh, okay, like I was kind of warned. So part of me wasn't surprised or caught back where I'm like furious and angry. It was just like, oh, okay, like you kind of knew these things, you kind of went into it, now your experiences, so you have a choice whether you are going to stay in this environment or kind of leave. And so kind of during that time, I ended up moving to LA in like 2018. And for me, that was like the soft way to kind of leave the church, like, because it's like, oh, I'm moving, so of course I'm not going to be here anymore, right? But I was still like every time I would come back, to Philly, I would visit and still kind of keeping in touch. But so anyway, long story short, 2020 comes. There's just I'm like, okay, it's time to leave. It's time to move on. And I sent the leadership email, respectful email. And I said, I'm, just saying that, it was great fellowshipping and I'm leaving. And at the end, the very end of it, I'm like, this is probably going to be a surprise. So I'm just asking, like, at least, like, read this over, give it a day or two, and then respond, and we could, like, talk about it, And I immediately, like, got a text message of an essay of, like, you're alone with Christian, you're not going to be blessed, like, just a lot of things. And I'm like, okay, all right. And so I didn't respond, but I did spend kind of the next few weeks and months just like processing of like, what what just happened kind of thing. Because even though there was like things within leadership that I didn't take to, I was still connected to the people, you know, and it was like I went there because I wanted to find community. That was something that I was just like, I didn't know at the time like how to express it or that feeling or need, but I just knew like, okay, I need like people. And so there were still people there that I was connected to. So there was like just confusion internally. And so I remember like going online, kind of looking up different resources about like spiritual abuse and kind of what that was. I remember maybe a few years, you know, prior, somebody had mentioned like even the term spiritual abuse. So I kind of remembered that and looked it up. And then so I'm looking up stuff on YouTube, and one day one of Tim's video pops up on my feed because I think he had just did a spiritual abuse series. And so the first time I saw it, by that point I was like exhausted. We go down these rabbit holes, and then eventually you're like, I don't even care anymore. And so I saw his video, and I clicked do not recommend channel on it. I pressed it. Like, I was like, I don't know what this guy in this Hawaiian shirt is about to say, but he's probably said what all the other four, things I've heard. And so the video went away for like a couple weeks, maybe a month. And then it came back on my feed. And I don't know, someone was just like, all right, just click it, see what he's saying. And man, like the first 10 minutes, I was just like, what? It just, I think the way he explained and broke stuff down and how detailed he got, it was as I got, and so eventually I like finished the whole series, and he's mentioning stuff like complex trauma and different stuff like that. And I finished that series, and then I kind of go look at some of his other videos, like, well, what's this complex trauma he's talking about? And I'm reading, and after I go through a few videos, I was like, oh, I got more than church issues and spiritual issues. It was, yeah, it was just like, I know it was divine in a way, but it was also like he was answering a lot of things that like I just was searching for, but not knowing I was searching for. You know what I mean? And uncovering like a lot of ways, like patterns, within myself that I was seeing and growing up. And I was like, wow, like what is all of this? And so I spent like the next few months just kind of going through, because we was home at this point. It's the pandemic, so it's not like I had anywhere to go. So I would like take walks and just put them on my earphones. I'm listening, and so eventually I see that like they have a program that they do. And I think I saw you guys were in Canada at first. I'm like, oh, they probably don't take like US. And so it took me a while to even like reach out, because I'm thinking like, oh, I don't know if I'll be able to go. And then I'm thinking like, it's probably super expensive. Like, and so I eventually just like, email them. They send me all the info. And fast forward, I'm like in the program and starting out. And so I tell Tim this all the time. I think I got into my first group session, and I'm like, who are these white people? Like, what is going on? Then there was like a new facilitator every day, and I'm like, okay, how's this going to work? And so it took me probably like a good 4 weeks to just like settle down in it. Because this is the first time I had experience or even sought after any type of therapy. And so kind of going back, 2017, 18, I started getting sick. I started getting like chronic migraines for about 2 years, and so my health is like plummeting and going through things. So that was one of the reasons I kind of moved to LA, just to try to get out of my environment, because I didn't know what was going on. And so even in that, it was like a journey. I'm like trying to change my eating habits, and I'm going first to my primary care doctors. They're running all these tests on me, and they're like, your tests are fine, like you're everything's normal. And I'm like, I'm eating a banana and I'm getting like heartburn, like something's not normal, right? And so that kind of sent me down the path of like holistic health, and I'm going to like nutritionists and chiropractors. And so at that point, like every doctor I would see before, they would like ask me questions first, like, well, how's your stress? And I'm like, I've never had a doctor ask me about stress. And so they would, ask me questions and talk. And across the board, about 5 different specialists I went to said, like, you have a lot of emotional stress and it's just wreaking havoc on your digestive system. And I'm like, what? I'm like, this quiet, soft voice person don't get mad with people. I'm like, emotional stress, like what? And so that kind of led up even going to lift, right? Because it was like, okay, I'm trying to change my eating. I'm doing all these other things. I'm trying to pray, and be spiritual, but something's still not clicking. And so that kind of other part of it was the emotional, the psychological, the mental part. And so I think coming into lift was kind of one of the last pieces that I needed. And so it's why it resonated with me so much what Tim was saying, because I'm like, oh wow, like, okay, I see that. Yeah, I do have a lot of emotional stress that I've just buried and buried over the years, from childhood, from adolescence, young adulthood, these traumas, that I couldn't figure or explain, because it's just like kind of get over it thing, you just got to keep trekking through life. And even for me, like looking back on like even experiencing the sexual abuse, that made me bury that so much. And for the longest time, I thought it didn't affect me because, as I gotten like deeper into lift and finally started unpacking these things, it was like you see the extreme of like, children experiencing sexual abuse, and then they either become like super promiscuous or like turn to drugs and alcohol. And I didn't either. You know what I mean? I didn't become a drug addict. I also didn't become promiscuous. And so I thought, well, maybe it didn't, it didn't matter. Kind of thing. I didn't, and so it just was like, okay, we'll bury it, forget it. But it was definitely hindering me from even experiencing relationships and intimacy and things of that nature, that like kind of freeze, that just being in fight flight, in that freeze mode. And so yeah, I came into lift and just like radically um changed my mindset on so much, and just my heart. And I think the most powerful thing was the group setting. It was hearing other people's stories, other people courageous. And also it was like, as I was listening to other people's story and group each week, there'll be things that other people will say that I'm like, oh, that happened to me. Like, that's trauma? I didn't even know that, or Tim, like when he would go through his list and stuff, I told him like half of that stuff is normal in our culture. You know what I mean? That like you don't even associate that it's bad or it's harming you in some way. It's normal. Some of these things are seen as good and badges of honor. And so it was like a lot of like some confusion in it, because I'm like, but I've been grown up to believe this is gold and this is actually dirt, and so how do you comb through that? And so I think though the first 2 years it was like, wow, I'm kind of going through all these things, but then it was the tearing down of things too, like the tearing down of things in my faith, the tearing down of things in my family culture, in my own life, that I really had to like start to challenge and question, which was scary, because I'm like, if I pull a thread on this tapestry, this whole thing could fall apart. And then what? Then where does my identity lie? Who am I after all of this? And so, yeah, that was a process. I think even like, right, hearing other people's stories, what initially like gave me that courage to then share that, particular trauma with my group. And then through that, like, walking through that with my lift coach, and then eventually telling my family, telling my brothers. I told my like close friends first, and just, getting the support of them. And it was like each time I would share that and kind of tell someone, it was like this weight being lifted off of me that I didn't know I had, for so long. That shame was just coming off me, because I thought like that was just a secret I was going to take to my grave, you know what I mean? But yeah, life had other plans for that. And so, yeah, just going through that, was Man, it was powerful, but it was also difficult. There was a point me and my lift coach were like going through a workbook and going through different things, and certain memories started coming up. I started getting nightmares. At one point, I remember some days, like after our sessions or group meetings, I would just lay on my floor and like literally just lay there until I either fell asleep because my body would just like tense up, and I didn't know what that was about. And I'm like, oh shoot, what did I do? Like, maybe I should have just left this alone, kind of thing. Um, and then that led me to like understanding like breath work, and I started getting into like yin yoga and trying to figure out other visceral. I would hear Tim talk about different things and, different resources of like, how do you release that trauma? How do you let that go? And so started kind of getting into some of those practices. And then also throughout that journey, and learning some of those things and sound and how color affects us, it made me kind of realize like, oh, my art has been one of the things that's really been keeping me alive this whole time, and I didn't know it. Right just before I left for LA, I had one of my first like in-person art installations, and I had like these really huge like 6-foot balloons hanging, and they like glowed in different colors, and we had like the sound come on. And so this young woman came into the art show. I didn't know her. She pulled me to the side, and she just started like weeping and crying. I'm like kind of taken aback, like what happened? I know you ain't getting a refund, but you don't like the show. And so she's just like, like I don't know you, like you, but you have no idea just the week I've been having. And when I came into this art show and just saw the colors and the light and the sound, it was just like this weight was like lifted off me. You could just like feel like this love in here. And I was like, wow, like that kind of took me aback. And I thought about that like for the next year or so, like, man, like, because when people would ask me with my art, like, why do you use color or sounds, I was just like, I don't know, I just like it, it's cool, I didn't. But as I was like started going through this healing journey, I'm like, oh, like, I'm drawn to these things because of their natural healing properties. I didn't realize that's why I was drawn to it, but now I kind of do. And so it just created like a deeper intentionality with my art and how I use it. And so, yeah, like that led me into starting a nonprofit called Birthday, because kind of through that healing journey, as I'm like exploring all these things, and you go through a time of like grief, and I'm changing, I'm learning about boundaries, I'm going back to family and friends, and I'm like, yeah, I don't like that anymore. And people are like, what are you talking about? You don't, And so I'm going through, that struggle and trying to change and going through that. But then I'm also like discovering all these other things about myself, and I'm discovering my voice again. I'm discovering my boldness, to kind of mimic the colors that I've been using. But and because a lot of ways I was like using bold colors because that's what I really wanted to be, but I just felt like I didn't have the confidence to. And so I'm like reconnecting back to these things, and I'm changing. And in the course of that, I'm also realizing that like, okay, my health journey and this life journey doesn't have to look one way. I have the ability as a human, as an artist, as a creative to do this my way too, and to experience joy through the process, and to, yeah, there's times where I might have to get away and cry, but maybe I just want to paint today, and that's okay too. That's also expressing healing, that's also expressing art. And so I my birthday is on Earth Day, and I'm like really into nature and just green and things of that nature. And so I'm like, oh, like let's call it birthday, right? Like let's make it a celebration too, that healing doesn't have to look dismal. I think a lot of times when we like, even now, that mental health and these things are becoming more and more prevalent in our society. When we think about mental health, for some reason everybody uses the image of a kid like, on the curb, sad and his head down. But I'm like, well, what if that also looks like joy? What if that also looks like community, and it also looks artful, and it also looks colorful to say, yeah, I've gone through these very traumatic things in my life. But healing is possible. Being resilient is possible to come back from these things, and in such a way that you can now help others, and so hearing stories like Tim, and how he got sick and kind of went through his process, but then made sense of, it all, and was able to come and give back and help others, which affected me, so that just further like encouraged and inspired me to then, yeah, take everything that, I've been through and kind of turn that into art in my own way. How I don't really do much things normal in my life, and so I was like, yeah, it was like a moment where I was like, you don't have to do your healing thing normal neither, the way other people do. You can do a cool yoga with cool lights and stuff and invite people out to it, and just allow them space to rest, even if it's for an hour or so. So yeah, that's kind of like been the journey that I'm still on, and I realize I'm going to continue to be on. I think to going through this process, especially when you're sick, when you're physically sick, you are very kind of like hell bent on finding something to get you out of that pain. And so I'm like trying to find the one diet, I'm trying to find the one supplement, I'm trying, and even when I got to lift, I kind of thought like, oh, this is it. If I just get this part, all the pain is going to go away, all the feelings and sensations are going to go away. But even coming into that, and doing the yoga and doing things, but still experiencing sadness, still experience being triggered, or, some of that anger coming up. It was just a point where I kind of got to like, oh, this is going to be a lifelong thing. There's not going to be one thing that's just going to come and fix everything and make everything better. But I could also see how my life was changing and transforming, and I was seeing how all of these things together was helping, yes, going to live, but yes, also eating well, but yes, also finding community, yes, also doing my art, yes, also doing breath work and yoga or whatever, and moving my body. All of these things together are helping me heal. But just trying to put the pressure or onus for one thing to kind of fix it, it kind of broke that reality and that expectation where it's like, okay, you're going to continue to find things that are going to help you in a holistic way, and this is just one part of it. I think Tim talks about that, physical, emotional, spiritual, financial, like these are all different pockets of your life, that as humans, like, we have needs, and the issue is when we're trying to like take a emotional need and fill it with a physical need, or a physical need with a financial need. It's like you gotta know where you are and then fill them with those things. You can't try to supplement out or discard one thing and think like, well, if I just eat right, I'll be cool. It was like, because I was doing those things, and but it's like, okay, I gotta look at all of my life, and one by one, day by day, some month by month, even year by year. Sometimes my life is like, okay, I'm just gonna focus on this right now, and then maybe next month we'll focus on that, because that could get overwhelming too, where you just constantly feel like, oh man, like my physical and my spiritual health and my like, but yeah, just learning to like pace myself and do what I can, when I can. And yeah, it's like been the journey. Been the journey. Woo.
Uh, I love hearing your story, and there's just this palette of what you've shared here, and I like to see how kind of like the tying the art back to the childhood as well. Um, I was wondering, like, could you talk? So you talked a little bit with sadness and grief still and experiencing them. Do you use art to express the sadness and grief as well?
Absolutely. I use it in a way, it's Cool. So, one of the prompts, and shout out to my lift coach, Brittany, just getting me through my art. So, a lot of times she would kind of give me homework assignments and be like, hey, express this through your art. Like, what does that look like? And so, one time I did like a photo series kind of expressing grief, what that looks like when we talk about accepting kind of all these different stages. And I kind of like visually what that look like. And so, yeah, now because I'm a bit more intentional with my art, I use it to be a bit more vulnerable. And I think I'm able to do that. I've always been someone that like friends and people just are naturally attracted to and drawn or come to for like advice or wisdom, and kind of being the one that holds it all together. And so because of that, people kind of let their guards down around me in terms of like just sharing and being open and truthful. And that kind of helps me with my own vulnerability, because I'm like, oh, like other people are going through things too. I think sometimes, especially when we get in society, we kind of all put these masks on and we're like, oh, how you doing today? Oh yeah, I'm cool. You straight. But I know that other people aren't cool. And not that I want to like tell their business or something, but it empowers me, because I'm like, even if people show up looking strong or feeling strong, like other people are going through health issues too. Like other people are going through family issues like me too. And so that just kind of breaks that barrier for me to like, okay, now through my art, what does that look like to address the sadness and grief? The year before, I did a kind of video montage just explaining like the anxiety and sadness I've been going through as an artist, being freelance the last 10 years. I'm like, I haven't gotten a W-2 for the last 10 years. So it's like, if a project doesn't come in, I don't get paid. I'm not making money. It's not like I have money coming in every 2 weeks like most people. And that in itself has been an emotional roller coaster trying to navigate. And during that time, I was like, really going through a depressive time, and just like constantly going through these highs and lows, and having projects and having money, and then not having projects and not having money. And so I remember like there was a period in the fall, and I'm just like, just down. I'm in my room like, man, I don't know how this is going to work. And so January came, and I got an opportunity to do like set design for the Oscars, and I'm photographing at the Grammys, and I'm like around all these celebrities, like, got flown out to Utah on a free ski trip with Google. I'm like doing all these amazing projects. And so there was a moment during all this stuff going on, and I was like, I kind of asked myself, like, T, if you knew all these projects were going to come in January, like, how would you have spent your fall? What have you have done? And I was like, oh, it's a good question. I was just like, well, I would have been excited, and I would have been preparing and resting, all these things. And then I was just like, okay, next time you find yourself in that space, do those things you said, in your mind, instead of giving so much time to the grief, to the sadness. You know what I mean? Yes, rest. And there's a period where our body is telling us, okay, rest, but even utilizing that time right. And so I was like, cool. And so those projects, I finished those up. Then I had a span for a few months where no projects were coming in. And I kind of went back to like, all right, now we're in the waiting period. What are you going to do at that time? And I'm like, all right. So I started traveling. I went to Japan for the first time, and I just was like, you got to live. You got to find a way, even between the mundane. Life has to still go on. You still got to find a way to live through the highs and the lows, and not just constantly waiting for when's the high, when's the next project going to come, or when I'm not going to have money. And so even balancing that sadness to where, yeah, I still give my time, myself time. If I need a couple days, just stay in my room and kind of recharge myself. But then it's not as long that I'm giving into that, where I'm like, okay, now we call one of your friends, go for a walk outside, or do, you know what I mean? Move your body, like get up, move. And so, yeah, it's been one of the ways that I've been able to like use that through the art as well.
I love too that you're using kind of rather than having this negative frame of the future to be able to recharacterize it for yourself, that the good times will come again, that good things will come again, and so that you can still be alive in this moment and enjoy this moment. I was wondering too, so as you're talking here with everything you're doing, you're you're vulnerable and authentic and expressive in like a very public domain. And what's your relationship today with that invisible girl, with that invisible
Mm,
child, and maybe that girl, the woman, the young woman who felt like an imposter in
yeah.
in her early career?
It's still a journey. It's and each day I feel like now the space I am in is like my life is finally imitating the art. Where I said before, like the boldness and the colors are showing up. I'm starting to embody that in my own life. You know, even down to how I'm dressing. I'm like wearing more colors, and I've been talking with some of my friends, and they're like, "All right, you start wearing your colors and stuff. Like, you sure you gonna get attention?" And I'm like, "Oh," and so I started doing it, and the attention has been, and I'm like, whoa, okay, you're right. Was I was I ready for this? Um, but it's also been teaching me that like I've always been seen. You know, I just didn't see myself. Other people have always seen me. And I think for me, one of the reasons why I like hid, even if I didn't understand why, is because at a point in time, yeah, being seen meant I could potentially be harmed or abused. And so I just remember as a kid, you know, we would go to family members' houses or, you know, somewhere for an event or party, and I would like find the nearest closet in somebody's house and just hide in the closet the whole time. My parents are like looking for her, like, where's here? Or I remember, you know, going to my grandparents' house, and whenever we would have like company over, I would like go under the bed and just hide under the bed the whole night, you know? So it was like I would physically hide. And so, you know, you get older, you can't fit under a bed anymore, but there was other ways where like either being quiet one or dressing in all black or deliberately like dressing in a way so that people wouldn't approach me. You know, I was like finding these ways to hide. And so now I'm like becoming more safe in my body and in my environment to say like it's okay to be seen. And I still use caution, you know, like I think that's one of the things too that like sometimes we can look at the ways we have adapted to our trauma and we're like, oh, this is bad. I'm like, no, like being hyper aware of my environments has kept me safe from danger, but it's also allowed me to be a great photographer because I'm able to like when I'm outside in the space, I'm able to see like, yeah, there's a white truck that keeps circling around this block, but there's also a really cool like flower wall over there too, you know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, I can use it for good. I can also use some of those things to like try to find beauty in the world around me, even when you know you don't always feel safe. And that's something too I think could even be different for women, experiencing going out into the world where, yeah, unfortunately, being out in the world isn't always a safe experience for us. And so we do have to be a bit more mindful than other people, or, you know, and so, yeah, I'm just like, yeah, just like trying to be safe and know that I am okay and that, yeah, I've always been seen, but now I'm starting to see myself accurately and I'm like, yeah, you are, yeah, you're that girl. You know, you're a good friend, you're authentic, you are who you are and who you say you are, and like there's a gift in that and you don't know who needs the real you. You know, you don't know out there like who can draw from your story or your experiences because they may be going through the same things too. And so if I kind of like hide my light behind the fear and the shame and all that, it's like, yeah, someone else could be missing out on gold, but I could be missing out on gold as well by like not putting myself out there in that way.
I think it's been about 6 months since I've seen you last,
Mm,
and I definitely see a change in you. That's very positive.
yeah.
And so, like you described, you survived by being on guard and invisible and hiding and making yourself small, almost mousy. Um, and now you're letting yourself be Tiayrra, and that means being bigger. That
Mm.
means being more not a mouse anymore. And it's to me, it's a beautiful thing to watch. It's a beautiful thing to see because to me, this new Tiara that I'm seeing, I love the old Tiara, but this new Tiara is just got extra pieces that are even more special, and I think are going to impact people a lot. So, congratulations on this continued growth for you.
Thank you.
And and I think like what I would say to anybody listening is like what you have shown me is it's been like 5 years since you went through lift, and just that this growth is a gradual journey. It's not a yeah, you get some sudden big steps of growth, but some of that deep stuff that comes from early coping mechanisms like hiding, and being small, you don't just overcome them in a day because there's a
Mm,
whole belief system around that. There's a
right.
whole fear driven thing around that that keeps you locked into that this is the right way to live,
Mm-hmm.
but you're starting to break through that. And I think for people to realize, accept the slowness of the journey at times, but it's still happening. And over time, you just see more and more positive growth things that are just wonderful to watch. So, congratulations. What, if I can just switch to something here. So, part of what I think you went through on your journey in Lyft is you're going through this internal healing journey, but you're also realizing kind of your community in Philadelphia, especially within the Black culture and all of that. There's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of need. How do you kind of pass on what you're learning to others? And what you realized is you can't just advertise, I'm going to do a seminar on complex trauma and
Mm.
expect anybody to show up because people are
Right.
going to, no, I don't even know what you're talking about, don't have trauma, blah, blah, blah. All this stuff you went through where our culture is so focused on getting our attention on all things that we think are important, but are really missing the deeply internal, very important things.
Mm-hmm.
And so your journey really was, how do I get people from my culture in Philadelphia to begin to be exposed to an environment where they can learn some basic tools that are going to help them, but also it's going to provide a platform to begin to teach them a little bit more about complex trauma and their internal world. And I really appreciated that kind of your willingness and flexibility to say, I got to come at this differently with my culture if I'm going to have any chance of making inroads and being effective and helping people really start to look at that deeper stuff. Um, so, birthday came on the scene, and it really was doing introductory things that I would say accomplish what is one of the very important pieces in early trauma recovery, which is really two things: finding a safe space
Mm-hmm.
and doing things that help with emotional regulation. Um, and that's what you were wanting to incorporate through all kinds of different things. So we would call a lot of that stuff that you do now kind of somatic therapies.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just itemize for us some of the different things that you've done
Mm-hmm.
that you've had people come in and spend part of a day, all of a day, um, that a lot of people are going, oh, that looks interesting, that looks fun, and they don't even know that they're getting some tools and that they're getting a little bit of connection, community, and information that's going to potentially help them down the road to look at deeper issues. So just kind of walk us through a little bit of stuff you've tried, what,
Okay.
how it's been received.
Cool. Yeah. So, yeah, I think so. During the time I moved to LA, um, that's wellness capital out there, right? Every other, beach, there's a sound bath or something going on. And so, yeah, that was a really like a 2 year period where as I'm going through Lyft and out there, I was really like isolated and alone too. And so, one, I think I had to connect to myself. I had to go through my own thing and figure out, what I was into, and even getting connected to my own story and my own heart. And so from there, right, I would be exploring like sound baths, and then I got into float therapy and myofascial, techniques and different things. And so as I'm going into these spaces, they are helping me. They're working. Um, but then also on the back end, I'm like I'm showing up in some of these spaces. I'm the only black woman or black person there. And so even though in some instances I felt safe enough to like kind of let my guard down or share things of that nature, it was still like, okay, sometimes some spaces you didn't really feel like you belonged or maybe welcomed. And so it was going through kind of that accessibility, but then also a lot of these things were expensive too, and so there became like I was getting like physical relief and things, but then there was a financial burden that started coming up. And I'm like, if I could go back and tally the thousands of dollars I've spent over the years just trying to like, find stuff for my health, it was like, whoa. And I mean, for me, I'm like, okay, this is what when I'm like into something, I'm going to invest into it. But then there was like an issue of affordability as well, right? Access and affordability. And so when I would come back home and travel, and even through that, I would post different things on my Instagram and share stuff. And a lot of people will automatically be like, oh, that look rich or expensive. Like, what's that? And I'm just like, nah, like I found a $20 Groupon, to do this, and I just make it work. And so there were some ways I was finding like save costs or whatever, but then some stuff was, pretty expensive. And so when I would come back home to Philly, I would like try to find sound baths. My routine from LA versus coming back home to Philly was completely different. And I was at much more, I was telling a friend this the other day, like, I don't know what it was, but when I was in LA, no headaches, no digestive issues. The minute I would come to Philly, headaches. So it's that environment that I'm still having to comb through. You know what I mean? Being here and about. And so, right, I would come back home, I would try to find these resources, and they just weren't available. And so I'm always a person that's like, me and my friends always say, create what you want to see, And so I'm like, okay, there's no sound baths here. Why don't I throw one? Why don't I make it? And that's what I did. And so kind of birthing it through, I think another thing too was, okay, experiencing these different modalities. I was also researching like the origins of these things. I think just in American culture in general, a lot of wellness practices are seen as things that like just white people do, And so in my community, there's a disconnect because it's like, black people don't like sit still, meditate. We don't go on hikes, we don't go on walks. But I'm like researching these things and our, African roots and indigenous people. I'm like, yeah, we do these things actually, And so it was me one getting the information and making the connection that like, oh no, this is a our thing too. And then coming back, relaying that to my community, but in a way that they were already receiving me through my art. So it wasn't that far of a stretch when people were like, this makes sense that you're doing this. But it was also like, I mean, I think that's just in general now, you got to catch people's attention, right? And so if there's cool colors or bright colors, it's like, oh, what's going on in there? And it's like, yeah, come on in, check us out. And so, yeah, it started there. And I feel like, yeah, some of these somatic practices are more so like the appetizer, right? It's like, cool, you come out, there's music, there's art. But then in the midst of that, we're also given different tools like, hey, like breathing helps lower your blood pressure, like do this. And so we have kind of 4 tracks within birthday. We have birthday present, which centers around like breath work and meditation. We have birthday noisemakers, which is around like sound healing, sound baths. We have birthday cake, which is centered around nutritional health. And then we have birthday suit, which is centered around like sexual health and trauma recovery and things of that nature. And so we curate, different events within these areas to just give people, once again, the smorgasbord of like holistic living. And so we essentially are like creating different options for people to try, because it's like, okay, yeah, for some people yoga might not be it, for some people sound baths might be it, but hopefully through the different options we're exploring, you can find one thing that resonates with you and like, oh, I really like this, you know what I mean? It's okay that like, and yeah, even in the spaces you see like a lot of wellness things and it's just yoga, you know what I mean, or something, and it's like everybody doesn't want to do that, and that's okay. There's other, God created multiple ways for us to get potassium, not just in bananas. And so it's just like, okay, we want to curate these different things and just kind of give people that option to like figure out what helps you, one, to remove stress. And I think even in our culture as we go, and this is across the board, not just for Black community, but it's like when you strip people of their basic human rights in terms of clean food and water and housing and clothing, there's no room to really explore what you want to be or what you want to do or have an imagination, because yeah, you are in a sense forced to continually be in survival mode. And so I wanted to remove the barrier of having people choose between going to the spa or their gas money for the week to get back to work, and people are making those decisions. I've had to make those decisions throughout my journey where it's like, man, I really want to like do this cool like wellness thing, but I got to pay this bill, you know what I mean? And I can't do that. And so it's like, how do we remove that barrier and even get to the basics? So it's like, okay, we can't rent a fancy venue to have this event. What if we just go outside and do it? Outside kind of is free, but so it's just like, okay. And so that was also centered around the name of like birthday, getting just back to like the basics, the natural, and not even necessarily needing all these bells and whistles to draw people in, but just like, what's the basic thing we can do? Can we go outside? Can we breathe for a second? Okay, that's free. That's still free. Cool. So that's been the way that like we've been able to draw people in, housing these different events. Right now we're working on a wellness retreat of our own. I'm trying to get together with a group of friends and creatives just for us to like go away and kind of unplug and get reacquainted with nature and community. I'm really intentional about like having in-person things. I think we're kind of starting to lose the sight of that, especially with the oncoming of like social media, which it's a great tool to use and connect with people. But I also don't want to lose sight of right what's in front of you, and right what's around you. And so that's also a big reason where it's like, that helped me of like getting outside, seeing people, really connecting in that way. Because it's just different when you're able to like hear what somebody's saying and the emotion behind it versus like sending somebody a text message or being able to hug and hold someone, even as they're telling you a story and showing support in that way, and how those things like regulate us. And so it was because my life is very unconventional and I am a freelancer, so I don't go into an office building every day and I'm working around the same employees or coworkers. You know, I know people talk about having a first, second, and third space. I really had a first space for the last 10 years. And so this was also a way of me creating my own second and third spaces, you know, especially after like leaving the church, right? That was at least a second space for me. But this is also the ways in which I was like trying to fulfill a need in my own life of like, okay, I need community. Well, let's kind of cultivate our own community through birthday.
So, to me, one of the things that I've seen just through all of the work that I've done is that we all have what we call communities. So there's white people have their communities, their sports clubs, their different clubs, black people have their communities. And often there's an assumption that if we say it's a community, then it's a really meaningful, deep community.
Mm-hmm.
And but often it's really a shame-based community. You can only talk about certain things. You got to conform. You got to see things only a certain way. You got to believe with kind of certain pieces of stuff, and everybody's on guard. You don't share too authentically because you got to conform to the community unspoken rules. But people are still longing for that deep community, but they're almost afraid that they're either never going to find it, or if they try to get there, they're going to get hurt.
Right.
So I think, to me, what I've seen with you is there was partly a realization that a lot of the community that you had experienced was some connection, but not super deep connection. And so it was a desire to create a space where people could experience a deeper connection that was really outside of their existing communities. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, that was something very early on when I came and consulted you and Shannon, and you know, when I told you guys I was starting birthday. Very early on, I think you or Shannon just said, you know, you can only take people as deep as you take yourself. And that really stuck with me in terms of, yeah, what it does look like to authentically build a community. And I knew that in order to create a space that was truly safe and vulnerable and authentic, I had to embody that first, you know, and so to speak, like, yeah, I had to put myself on the chopping block to say, like, I'm not all perfect. I'm not all together. I'm looking for a community. I'm looking for these spaces myself. And in doing that, it has attracted other people who were also looking for those spaces. And so I think it's been a mutual ebb and flow of that, of people who are like resonating as I share my story of like, yeah, like, man, you know, it's that people come like I too have been like, I have family and children now, and I'm like listening to your story or listening to podcasts, and I didn't, you know, these were things that, you know, kind of in the same way I felt when I first heard you, like these are things I never even explored or knew I could say out loud even. You know, these weren't things in my faith that I thought I could challenge, but like I'm hearing you and I'm seeing you like kind of take the steps, and it's giving me like I could speak up too. I can like explore or challenge that too. And so, yeah, everything is like has started with myself. It started with my team. I have on my board two of my like closest friends, Ashley, that I started the clothing line with, that kind of sectored me into art, and my friend Manny that I met at that one job. And so they've been helping me cultivate this too. And we've all been going through our own healing journey simultaneously, and just so the energy that we are exchanging and building as we're, you know, planning these different things, it's just an overflow and a reflection of the work that we are doing internally that just naturally shows up in how we build things out.
Well, bless you for all of that, Tiara. It's great to see.
Yes.
Andy, what you had something else?
Yeah, I was wondering, you had talked about going into some spaces and then the kind of some places you felt welcome and belonging, and some others you didn't feel welcome or belonging. Like what what do? What do you find works for cultivating welcoming and belonging so that people feel safe when they come into these vulnerable community spaces?
Yeah, I think it starts with acknowledgement. Um, One thing I will say, even going through like Lyft, is that on a human heart level, inside of our houses, we're all the same. We're all going through the same family, parental issues, sibling issues, sexual abuse. That does not, trauma doesn't have a clear line of like, hey, are you black? Are you white? I'm going to skip over you. No, we all going through the same thing, right? Which makes us humans. Now, when we go outside of our house and we go into the world, I think there's another layer of trauma that Black people and other people of color can traumas they experience on top of the familiar trauma that's going on. And so for me, it's like it's an acknowledgement of that yes, we share a collective trauma at the heart of it, but then there's also some other layers that are also packed on to us as we try to navigate in the world. Um, and making space for that, acknowledging that like, hey, the same resources that you might have, or just saying like, hey, just like eat a plant-based diet, like everybody doesn't have that opportunity or chance, even, you know what I mean, if they wanted to. Or just saying, hey, just go get therapy, or hey, just do this. Some people can't afford that, or if they can, the resources are not well equipped, to properly service them in certain communities. So I think that's the thing where it's like, when you want to welcome people into your space, and we welcome all people into our events. I'm not going to turn anybody away, but my heart is to acknowledge and zone in that Black and brown communities are at a disadvantage in some ways, and how, because I am also experienced that through, you know what I mean, experience and relation, I can connect in that way, that's something, Tim, that you told me, like, yeah, there's a certain demographic and way that you can speak to your people that I can't, you know what I mean? And so it's like, yeah, so the things that I've been learning, I've been trying on myself first, processing through myself first, and then through that I'm like, okay, it's just translating. How can I take what I've learned through Lyft? I can understand it in a way and adapt in these spaces, but everybody in my community maybe don't feel comfortable in a Lyft because they're like, no, I don't know. And so how can then I translate that? What does that look like? Me speaking that back to my people in the way that they may feel safer or comfortable understanding that, you know what I mean? And then we still collectively healing in our communities, but there is a different language that we all speak. And how do I speak that language to let someone know that they are heard and they are seen and they are felt and welcomed here?
So you talked at the very beginning about kind of all the girls that wanted to be your friend or were actually wanting to be a friend to your brother.
Mm-hmm.
So you ended up feeling kind of used by them, didn't trust them, and had some girl issues that came out of that. Um, I think that's also kind of, I don't want to stereotype it too much, but within the Black culture, there's often been that patriarchy where women see their role as pleasing men. That's the only way to, they have to be good enough for a man. And so that's their identity is based around attracting a man and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that can generate really women are the competition, women are a threat, the enemy. So you just got to be very careful in opening up to women, trusting women because they'll use it against you. It would be a cat fight, etc. So to me, part of your challenge within that cultural thing is creating a safe space for women where they can learn to have meaningful women relationships of trust and true authenticity and vulnerability. What are you finding is helping to break down some of that cultural stuff.
That yeah, that's so true. And like even now I'm like a lot of these things are connecting. I know even like each event we have, especially Manny's like, yo, you're really calling us to women and a lot of and I'm like, no, like everybody needs to come out. And I see that I think in general most women in the world are seeking wellness and therapy and trying to better themselves, and education as women has gone on, right? And men are as well. You're seeing that come on as board. But women have always kind of been those
Yep.
leaders that's like, hey, we going, there's, I always say there's 39 Proverbs 29 women church ministries and like one man's so things have always kind of been sold or geared to women. But I think in my case, it has been, thankfully, I have some amazing women in my life that I've been able to cultivate friendships and trust with that has like healed those wounds of mistrust and abuse and things of that nature to where I I'm starting to know what's safe and what's not, like the certain type of people or personalities that I can't rock with, and that's okay too, to acknowledge that everybody's not for me. But yeah, I think it's just been like those shared experiences, and for me, the more that I have had relationships that have been healing, they allow me to like let those guards down in terms of like being mistrustful or like or what's this person's motive or what's that kind of thing, because I've kind of like maneuvered through the world like that for a long time. And so now, like I said, I still tap into my intuition, and I still see people out, and even give people chances to prove, show themselves a true friend or not. And then I'm like, okay, well, that didn't work out. Let's keep it moving. But yeah, I'm more like, because I know that a healthy relationship with women can exist, it like, yeah, it's helped me, and even now it's helping me really like I said, reconnect back to my own womanhood and my own femininity and being secure in that. And yeah, like not that sense of worth, like you said, is very true, where we become in competition with one another, and instead of just saying like, yo, I'm enough already, you know? Yeah, it's good to get the validation or acceptance at some point in time, but then it's also like, I know who I am when I'm around people. I know who I am when I'm not around people. And those two things are congruent, then that's enough. That's, you know what I mean? That's being a good friend, that's being a good human. And so, yeah, like being able to connect with other women who are just as vulnerable and authentic has really, yeah, helped me heal through that.
Another question that I had for you, and like to me, it's I think one of your biggest challenges on a very practical level, and
Mm-hmm.
that is the whole financial piece. So you've got people that kind of in cultures that have been oppressed, that can hardly keep food on the table, pay their bill, put gas in the car, all of those very basic necessities. And now you want them to think of going to something for some therapy, and it's like, no, just not even in the realm of possible. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so they want to, it's just realistically not doable. What 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 have you been able to do to kind of help work through that very significant practical challenge?
Yeah. The first thing has been just taking the burden off of myself and my team that we're going to save everybody and fix everybody. So I think coming into it, I'm like, man, I want the whole hood out here doing breath work and, just everybody coming together. But um, you're also realistic. And I'm taking that burden that like we're going to reach everybody. We're not. And so right now, I am focused on the people who do come and who do make the effort. While also not like being mad or demonize those who don't come or can't come, or even if we do something for $15 or ask for a donation of something, it's like, okay, if you can't afford it this go around, maybe you can later or so, or if there's a chance we can make space, we will. But yeah, just not putting that pressure of like trying to get everybody, but then also like it's our biggest challenge. It's tough, and not just in the wellness space. I'm now like working in the nonprofit sector and within education. And we were just at some conferences in Austin and Philly a few weeks ago, and the same issues that plague the wellness is also in education. So this is a system, this is a life that's built that unfortunately in some ways it is intentional,
Yes.
to keep us out of spaces, to keep us out of wellness. And like I said, I feel like on a even on a deeper level, is to keep people from their true purpose too, and what they're supposed to be doing in life. One of the things that really like impacted me when I first went to Japan, we got to stay with a couple like up in the countryside for a few days. Older husband and wife, both were artists. They built their own house and different stuff. And it was just a sense of stress that they didn't have that felt so uncanny to me, but also healing because and I don't know what their financial situations were, but it just seemed that like their basic needs were taken care of and they had the energy to do their art and to give in the way that they could like help the world and their community around them. And one, I think for me, it kind of put me in a space of like, oh, okay, life doesn't have to be lived the way you've grown up to, whether it's in your society or family. You can eventually find a way that like, yeah, your basic needs are met, and then you can go and do what you really want to do. But then also there was a grief in that because I'm like, man, like I feel like this is how we were intended to live as humans, right? To like at least have what we need so that yeah, we can go and explore and figure out what we want to do in life. But because we don't have those things, I feel like some people don't even have the energy or the will to figure out what happened to me as a kid and how that affects me now, or what, how my parents' divorce affected me, where it's just like, I literally have to survive. And that's all the energy I have to give. That's all the money I have to give. And so, like I said, I try to do as much as I can and use my influence and my power and my leadership and the resources and connections that I have to bring these things to us as best as I can, connecting with people like you and all the people that I've been meeting along the years, and trying to package that up, even if it's on a small scale or two. Like, I don't feel like I need to go reach millions, but if I could reach 10, then maybe those 10 could go reach 20 and those 20 could go reach 30, and that can carry on by that. And yeah, so I just like trying to stay in that because that can become stressful too. And so I even have to check myself and like, okay, the purpose of you creating these spaces is to relieve stress and tension. So when I feel myself getting overwhelmed and stressed, I'm like, we're deviating from the purpose. You know what I mean? Like, because if you are all worked up and stressed, once again, that energy, you're not going to be able to fully show up as yourself to other people. And so, yeah, I just breathe and take my time, do what we can when we can. And, yeah.
So I'm thinking now of other challenges you face. So I read a couple years ago Viola Davis's autobiography, and I just found it fascinating, very well done. But one of the things that she said, said that stood out to me. So raised with tons of trauma within a community, um, both in the home and in the culture, in the poverty that she grew up with, but also there's coming out of slavery. There's just a mindset about
Mm-hmm.
physical abuse that is tolerable to give to kids and obedience required, but a toughness that's needed. And so when people would talk about going to therapy, what? We don't go to therapy. We just get over it. We deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was almost a stigma that you were judged if as weak if you were open to therapy. Um, is that mindset changing, or are you finding ways to help people deconstruct that mindset?
Yeah, it is changing, but it's also very, very deeply ingrained to the point where I think unconsciously we are still operating it without even knowing. Um, when we were at one of the education conference just a few weeks back, during one of the speakers' presentation, there was a published like in a medical journal. It was like from 1848, and it said black people are immune to mental illness. You know, and so these are like this was in a medical published journal, and so the stigma, it's so deeply ingrained into even like thinking pain tolerance that blacks can have within the medical system, that like somehow we're superhuman and can't feel pain, like these things that like people, that are just belief systems, not just like, hey, I'm putting this on, but these are deep belief systems, which is hard to uncomb, and I remember listening to a lecture, and just someone explaining like the emotional detachment within the black community, right? Of like them bringing us here, and as a coping mechanism, black mothers like distancing and detaching themselves from their children because they could be taken from them at any given moment. And so you don't want to attach to this child that can be taken. And so you distance yourself emotionally to try to minimize the pain that you're going to feel, right, when this child is gone. Or demeaning your kid and like literally like calling your kid stupid or dumb because if you show his abilities, the master could also pick up on that and take him, right? Because he's strong, he's big. So you have to like, in an effort to keep your child safe, you have to demean them so that they're not taken. So all of the that's why I say like there's certain things in our community specifically that are different because we've been told it's gold and it's been dirt though, and it has harmed us. And so even now you think about that generation after generation of this mother disconnecting emotionally from her child, and that passes down, and we have these tension with our mothers, and not tension just with our father, like all of these things. And so it's very hard. We are starting to see a tide of like it's starting to become less stigmatized in our community. I feel like there's something going on within my generation, on many given fronts. Like this is like my generation, right? So we're between like having technology and not having technology. So we're kind of like half normal, half AI, right? But also, we're the first generation that is like even been breaking the traditional norms in terms of like most of us went to college and like me started off in the safe career, but then eventually was like, yo, like I want to be an artist though. What does that look like to really pursue my dreams and what I want to do? To where now the generation after us, they're like coming out the gate like, yeah, I'm gonna be a YouTuber, or I like to paint, so I'm gonna be so. And even now with like therapy, a lot of us are also like, man, I'm going through these issues. Now I have children, I'm raising them, and there's a breakdown, and now we're going to therapy. So there is a change in the tide where we are starting to break down a lot of the stigmas and the, hey, what goes on in the family, keep it in the family. I don't know. I think the pain threshold has reached its tipping point, and we're just like, enough is enough. We don't want to, because we're getting sicker now too. You know what I mean? And I think that has been honestly the catalyst, and just the world and home, but especially in our community, that we're seeing the diseases, we're seeing, people dying younger and younger, to where we're like, yo, something's not right. And whatever it is we need to do to fix this or find some type of relief, like we're exploring that. And so there's hope in that there are a lot of people and healers who are coming to the forefront and who are speaking up, who are putting themselves out there, who are creating resources. But it's still a lot of work to be done. There's still a lot of things to be uprooted and challenged, and it's still going to take time, because yeah, it's so deeply embedded. I mean, I forget what I was doing the other day, but I didn't even realize, like, man, like, it was simple too, but you just don't realize, like, how you show up in certain spaces, because, like, it's better to just be small and not say something versus, like, going through. I'm even going through a situation now where, like, my grandmom, had to go into the hospital. She's about to turn 90 Sunday. She had to go into, the hospital in January and have surgery. And so even seeing her interactions with the doctors and, like, not telling them she's in pain, but then, like, she'll tell us, like, yeah, I'm, like, hurt. And I'm like, so seeing that fear disconnect, like, why aren't you telling these doctors you're in pain or something's hurting? And so now I'm, like, combing that and seeing that through generationally, how, like, yeah, some of the fear that you deal with is not just your own. It's your mom, it's your grandma's, her mom's story, and these things, and how we operate into society. And so, yeah, it's definitely deep. It's a lot to work to do, but I mean, I am hopeful that we at least got a rake. We got a rake, and we're trying to get the leaves, as they steadily blow off the tree. But, at least we got a rake, and hopefully we can start bagging some of this stuff up so that the generations to come can be at a better, advantage, and maybe have to go through less traumas that we did, and listening to our children, and treating them as humans, and being mindful that that's a great responsibility too, and not just, like, making choices out of, like, well, I'm this old, so let me get married and have a family. You have no idea the weight and the responsibility that holds, that it does impact other people's life. The decisions that you make affect other people, because we're all connected.
Well, I see you as providing some really good leadership and thinking to your community, which is just wonderful to see. We're drawing to the end here. I just want to turn it over to Andy to see if you have anything you wanted to kind of wrap up with, Tiayrra. I think it's been a wonderful conversation. I've just enjoyed it so much, Tiayrra.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a couple things I think in this last little bit of the conversation. Like, I'm noticing there's so much of complex trauma is invisible. I was wondering, you talked about kind of the difficulties with talking about mental health and going into new and uncomfortable situations. And one of the things that you've done is you've shown this courage to go into either uncomfortable situations or to try these new things. Is there anything that you would say to others? Like, how would you encourage someone else? Because, like, you've come out on the other side with more access to creativity, to joy, to recognizing safety, to feeling safety. Like, is there a way that you would frame it to someone else, just to encourage them to take the step, even to do something that may feel new and
Mm.
uncomfortable?
Um, I would say you're not gonna die. Like, you're not gonna die. I think that's, like, I don't know. That's the only thing I could think of. Like, sometimes when fear and anxiety is that strong, that you think, like, if I say this, if I share this, if I come, I'm just, like, gonna lose it all and die, right? And that's not true. I think you will really find yourself. You'll find life, actually. You know what I mean? Where you can really live life and not be tied and tethered to the opinions of others or your environment, or like, we all are artists. We all are creatives. You know, it doesn't matter that it's, if you don't use a paintbrush or camera, there's other ways that creativity is birthed into the earth, and you have that in you. And you know, it's such a relief to live in that. You know, I had my days where I wonder why I had to go through certain stuff, and continually, like, there will be pain points that I will have to face in my life. You know, I have yet to be, married or have children or in a deep, intimate relationship. And I'm sure when I get there, there are going to be more things that are going to trigger me, and I'm going to have to uncover and be uncomfortable with. But in the same way I shared this story earlier, is like, the highs come again. Like, the pendulum in life swings if you just find a way to keep living, you know? And I know for some people, it can get so unbearable to the point where you think, like, I don't, after this, but it's just like, man, I find hope in myself and my ability to be resilient, and to know that, like, you've done hard things and you continue to do hard things, and once again, you're alive, and the people around me hold me up and hold me accountable and support me, and that, helps me move even when I don't have the energy or faith to be optimistic, because I'm not always, in that light. Like, yeah, I get tired too. I get, deal with still depression and just things, in that nature too, emotionally. But it's in those times where I say, when I am in good spirits, I make sure I put certain systems and things in place so that when I'm not in good spirits, they can then, it's kind of like a generator. Like, you got to have a backup generators in your life, so that when you kind of run out of power or wind, that's where your community comes in, and they can be generating that power and that optimism and hope for you. And so I would tell people to, like, yeah, find a good foundation, however that looks like, and you have to put yourself out there too, but, like, and putting yourself out there in the right way, um, you know, yeah, you can be the master and tool of your life to create the things that you want to experience, you know what I mean? Despite where you are, your economic issue, racial, like, you can. You know what I mean? Like, you can.
You provide a wonderful message of hope, Tiayrra, and I
Thank
think
you.
that's such an important message. So,
Thank you. And yes, thank you, Tim, and the community, just the safe space that you've built. And yeah, same thing, like, how one story connects to the other. And like I said, even if you reach, five people, that's how those five people go and reach others. And so, yeah, thank you for the gift that you give to all of us, and the time, and energy that you put into it, and your family, and just in a sense, yeah, like, I feel like there are certain people who have that greater courage to just put themselves out on that chopping block, so to speak, so that others know that they're not alone. And yeah, so yeah, just like, thank you. Oh, I'm glad that YouTube ignored my my request that day, and that, your video came back up on my feed, because I needed that. I was searching for it, and yeah, I like found that. So yeah, life, you never know what can happen in life. That's why I tell people, like, just keep trying, keep, another day. You never know what could happen that next day.
Thanks for that, Tara. And before we go, where can people find you online and support your work?
Yeah, so you can find me personally at A Brilliant Nomad. That's just spelled out right. A Brilliant Nomad on Instagram. Also, website abrilliantnomad.com. And then you can find Birthday at Birthday Co. That's spelled BIRTHDEI on Instagram, and then as well as birthday.co. Birthdayco.org. I'm tripping now. So yeah, that's where you can find us. But if you just find my Brilliant Nomad, those links are also listed there. And yeah, that's how you can support us, check out the work that we're doing, and yeah, just like, man, sharing the art, sharing the cool things, the funnies, the humor in it all. You know what I mean? I think like laughter is good too. And not having to be so serious or uptight and things. And so yes, it's just the way that I'm able to express myself through those mediums.
Sarah, we're grateful for your creativity and your expression
Thank you.
and the way that you're able to hold space for discomfort and healing. You brought a pretty good gift here today.
Thank you.
And to everyone listening, whether you're questioning the roles you've been handed in life, making your way through burnout or grief, or just trying to feel more human, you're not alone. And we're glad you spent this time with us. Thank you for joining us on the Time with Tim podcast. If you'd like to share your own experiences or have questions, feel free to email us at podcasts@timfletcher.ca. Want to learn more about complex trauma? Subscribe to Tim Fletcher's YouTube channel for past lectures and his Friday night Tim Talks. You can also connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok. Looking for more support? We offer programs and courses to help with healing complex trauma and recovering from addictions. Visit timfletcher.ca to learn more or send us an inquiry. We're here to support you. Until we meet again, take care, and thank you for letting us be a part of your healing journey.